hard on me. Dry it out. Everybody doing okay? It's good to see everybody this morning. I got up early. How many of you liked getting up early? All right. So, Thursday night, we talked a little bit about the communion, first communion, a little bit about the Jesus serving by washing the feet of the disciples, and then Friday night, Brandon took us through the week leading up to the crucifixion. This morning, we're going to talk about what happened right after, Easter morning, early that morning, up to the next couple weeks. Let's try to get an idea through the whole story. Of course, there's no substitute for just jumping in there and just going through all the Gospels. We're going to jump around from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of them this morning. So if you get an opportunity, just get them out and just read the story through all of them on your own as well, because there's a lot. There's a lot that happened that morning. So, this morning, once I got up, it was still a little dark outside, and that's where our story starts this morning. It was still dark, and through the streets of Jerusalem, there were some men hurrying towards the house of the high priest. They need to see him immediately. Of course, once they got there, they knocked on the door. Someone come to the door, and they said, "We need to talk to Caiaphas immediately." And they said, "Well, it's pretty early in the morning. You're going to have to wait a little bit, So they hung out there at the gate for a little while, and once they got into Caiaphas, they reported to him and said, "We have an issue. We got a problem this morning. You remember that tomb of the executed Nazarene? Well, it's empty. And we're the ones that were supposed to guard it, and we didn't do a very good job. It's empty, it's open." Now, Caiaphas, at first, he was confused. I could imagine he was there. He saw it. He knows that Jesus died. He knows he was put in the tomb. He knows the rock was sealed over it. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how this could be. And then he went from that to angry, I could imagine, because, the whole plan that, Brandon went through that as well, the whole plan that they went through to make this happen, it's all for naught at this point. So he was angry, and then he went to be a little calculating at this point. They were questioned multiple times, these temple guards, as to what happened. And every time the story was the same. So he said, "Come back a little later, you can talk to the elders. Tell them the story." Same thing. Still the same story. So when it come down to it, the high priest and the group there, they said, "Here's what we're going to do. Here's your story. The story is you guys fell asleep, a little incompetent. You fell asleep, and as you were sleeping, the disciples came, stole the body away, and that's where we're at." So they gave him some money, and that's exactly what those men did. That was the story they told, and that's what they went with. So there was a lot going on. Now, for the disciples and his followers, not just the 12, but there was multiple followers of Jesus, all hope was gone. Jesus was dead. They thought this is going to be the one that, some of them thought this is going to be the one that's going to free us from the Roman rule. We're going to be free people. It's going to be great. You're going to be in charge, and it's going to be a wonderful time. Others, they knew a little bit more that it was more of a spiritual kingdom and things of the sort. So, but either way, all hope was gone. Things had changed. A lot had changed just in a few days. We know that Jesus was dead at that point, right? Hailed as king just the week before, and dead as a common thief on Friday. Now, the women who had ministered and traveled with the disciples were trying to work out grief as well. We know that people handle grief in many different ways. Now, they had watched from a distance as Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, that they had quickly anointed Jesus. They wanted to get him in the tomb before the Sabbath, so it was kind of a quick process. Now, at the first opportunity, they wanted to get there and complete the anointing of Jesus for burial. So they got up early as they could, to be ready just right at twilight. Before dawn, Mary Magdalene and a small band of women were on their way to the tomb to continue and prepare Jesus' body for that burial. Now, as they walked, they pondered a problem. We can find it in Mark 16. As they walked, they said, "Now, who's going to roll that stone away? It's pretty big, right? So what are we going to do when we get there?" So as they were talking about it, they arrived. And as they arrived, the stone had already been rolled away. And they saw an angel which instructed them to go tell the disciples the news. Now, Mary came to Simon Peter and John and told them that they had taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they had laid him. So she was a little confused. Now, the two men, of course, they they ran towards the tomb. It tells us that John outran Peter, and when he got there, he just looked inside the tomb. And when he saw, he believed. Now, not necessarily what Mary had thought at that point, which we'll get into that in a moment, that maybe the body was possibly stolen or just placed somewhere else, but they believed that Jesus was alive. Now, John and Peter entered the tomb that first Easter morning not knowing what to think until they saw what was inside. Now, what did they see? Now, if we go to John 20, 5 through 8, we'll read that. And it says, "And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And so Simon Peter also came, following him, and entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had first come to the tomb then also entered, and he saw and believed." So at this point, it's worth realizing, you saw in the picture up there, the stone wasn't rolled away so Jesus could get out. It was rolled away so Peter and John and Mary could come in. It wasn't necessary for Jesus to get out. That stone was moved. It's so they could come in and know, so they could come in and see, and then they could share it with others. So they saw the linen wrappings lying, not unwound, not thrown aside, not lying there in a pile, but on the slab where the body had laid. Now the wrappings were kind of there like a cocoon, I guess you would say. It was still there in the shape of the body, kind of like if you take a glove off and you lay it down, it's still kind of got the shape of the hand. That's kind of what it was like. Maybe a little collapsed, a little deflated. The way they would do it to prepare the body, whether it was strips of cloth or pieces, patches of cloth, they would lay it down, put spices over, some spices. And of course, at this time, it was more of a maintenance issue where the body would lie there for a few days. Not to go in a whole lot of detail, but that was the purpose. The spices was to help with that process. So they had the weight of that. So what they saw was kind of this little cocoon-shaped thing, maybe a little face, because the body wasn't there. And that's what they saw. And when they saw it laying there, that's when they realized that he was alive. Now, Mary Magdalene, she had stayed at the edge of the garden during this time. We know that earlier, once again, they went to prepare the body. And one thought seemed to be on her mind, and that was the body of Jesus had been lost, and she must find him. She went towards the tomb. In John 20, it tells she stood outside the tomb, and she was crying, and then she stooped down to look inside. And she saw two angels inside, and they asked her. They said, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said, "Because they had taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." She turned around, and Jesus was standing there, but she didn't realize that it was him. John tells us that she thought that he was the gardener. So Jesus asked her the same question. "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" And Mary said, "Sir, if you had carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." So Mary was emotionally empty. I'm sure she hadn't slept much since Friday. I'm sure she hadn't ate much since Friday. She was living on grief. Like I said, and people deal with things in a lot of different ways. And she was struggling. So Jesus said to her one simple word. He said, "Mary." Now, she could have recognized that voice from anywhere. And her reply was, "Rabbi." So what a sweet sound that first Easter morning in that garden, his gentle Mary, and her response as Master. So Mary came prepared to mourn, and now she could worship. So much had happened in those few days as Cleopas and his friend walked the winding road towards Emmaus. They talked about a lot of things. They were heading back home. Talked about a lot of things. Jesus' entry into the city. There had been the night when Judas had left the upper room to meet with the high priest. The time in the garden on the hillside, and Jesus in prayer under the stars, and the olive trees casting shadows. Judas and the temple guard arresting Jesus. Cleopas and his companion were caught up in this discussion, just reviewing what they had seen, what they had heard, things that had happened. They had Judas's kiss, the arrest, Peter's denial at the campfire in the courtyard of Caiaphas. Then a collection of painful memories. The scourging, the yelling of the mob, the marching to Golgotha, the sound of the hammer echoing through the valley, then the darkness, the earthquake, and then the death of the one they loved, the one they called Master. As they talked, they didn't notice that a stranger was approaching. In Luke 24, it goes through the story. It says, the stranger asked, "What is the conversation you're having with each other as you walk?" Now the men stopped and Cleopas answered, he said, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days?" Would be kind of a confusing thing. He says, "Hey, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean everybody knows about this? This was this huge event." So Jesus answers, "What things?" And the two men explain further concerning Jesus of Nazareth. And this is in Luke 24:19 through 21. It says, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we have hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it has been the third day since this happened." And the stranger began with Moses and all the prophets and explained to them all the scriptures that referred to himself. The 7.5-mile walk to Emmaus passed by very quickly. And they soon arrived, and it was getting dark. And the two men begged the stranger to please stay with us, stay the night with us in our home. It was hospitality, great thing to do. And they said, "Well, if you can't stay the night, then please at least come in and have the evening meal with us." So they sat down to eat their evening meal. In the most natural way, the stranger gave thanks before he took the bread in his hands. There was something, maybe the way he gave thanks, maybe the way he took the bread, maybe the way he broke the bread, maybe possibly saw the marks on his hands. But whatever it was, in that moment, they knew. They knew that it was Jesus, and in that moment, he was gone. It seemed impossible, but they had seen him with their own eyes. They immediately went the 7.5 miles back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples the amazing news. Now, the women who had went to the tomb much earlier in the day had already told them the tomb was empty. Then Mary Magdalene announced, "I have seen the Lord." Peter and John appeared talking about the empty tomb, and they offered an explanation for it, resurrection. Now Cleopas and his friend came with the same words as Mary, "We have seen the Lord." Now in John 20, it records where Thomas proclaimed without proof, without seeing, without touching, "I won't believe." In 8 days' time, he would be able to touch and see, and now he proclaims, "My Lord and my God." Peter had witnessed this, and there was no doubt in his heart. Something had happened. Jesus was crucified and was alive, but Peter was troubled. He felt shame because he had denied his Lord. When Simon Peter was troubled, he went back to the nets. Maybe with the winds of the sea on his face, maybe the net sliding through his finger, maybe the tug of the fish would help him to forget. So he said, "I'm going fishing," he said, and 6 of the disciples went with him. They fished throughout the night and caught nothing. So as they rowed back to the shore, they noticed someone was standing on the beach. And they heard the man say, "Children, have you caught any fish?" And of course their answer was no. And then next they heard, "Cast your nets on the right side of the boat, and you will find a catch." Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? They cast the net, and it was filled with fish. As they got closer, John spoke up, and he said, "It is the Lord." Now as Peter understood this, he jumped overboard and waded ashore. They cooked some fish they'd caught around on the fire that Jesus had prepared for them there on the beach. And once they finished breakfast, Jesus turned to Peter and asked him a question. He said, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Then feed my lambs." Again, Jesus asked, "Simon, do you love me?" He said, "Yes, you know I love you." He said, "Again, feed my lambs." Then a third time, "Simon, do you love me?" Now he was hurt. Why would he keep asking this same question when I'm giving him the answer? And he answered the third time. He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know I love you." Peter denied Jesus 3 times earlier. Now he was asked to pledge his love 3 times. Jerusalem had not been impressed with the conduct of Jesus' disciples during their arrest and the trial of their master. They weren't courageous. In fact, they had either ran away or followed from a great distance. After the master's death, the group had hidden themselves away, the doors locked, it says, for in fear of the Jews. After that first Easter morning, we find these same men who were timid and scared and ineffective, preaching openly with no fear of anyone. So what made the difference? On a certain Sabbath, at a time between sunset and dawn, in a new tomb belonging to Joseph of Arimathea, there was a moving of an unseen force. The breath of God moved through the garden. Life had been breathed back into the dead body that had been placed on a stone slab. The dead man had risen come out of his grave clothes, and walk to the threshold of the tomb. That was the difference. It was their continuing relationship with their risen Savior. Through his Spirit, they had guidance and strength. They had boldness and courage, qualities they hadn't had until after that first Easter morning. They knew he was still with them. He had promised, and they felt it. The promise he had made to them before his death was now fulfilled. And they went across the land, they crossed the sea, they shook the Roman Empire, and they changed the world. And you can have that same relationship with the resurrected Jesus. Your life today can be guided by Jesus. Your promises can be solved by his wisdom. Your weakness can be turned to strength by his help. Your struggles can become victories by his grace, and your sorrows can be turned to joy by his comfort. This is the reality that can be yours. This relationship with the resurrected Jesus. Through his Spirit, it is available now. And this is the real meaning of Easter. So we're going to have a song here. Sorry, Daniel. And as we have this song, stand up, we'll sing, we'll worship through music. And if you feel the need to come and pray, that's what the altar's for. If nothing else, just to thank